Ever wonder what it was like before the apostles, actually became the apostles?
Kind of like a behind-the-scenes peek before they were, well, the apostles.
Exactly. And today we're diving into that period, those 5 months before they became like the A-team of early Christianity.
Right, using the Urantia book as our guide.
And full disclosure, this book, it's a spiritual text. So,
Not exactly your typical history book.
right. But for this deep dive, we're going to treat its version of events as like our historical playground, just to be clear.
Sounds like an adventure. And this period, it's full of surprises. Think about it. We usually see the apostles as these almost mythical figures, right?
Larger than life, definitely.
Exactly. But here we get this glimpse into their lives before all that, when they were just regular guys figuring things out.
And it all kicks off with Jesus making a decision that honestly kind of makes you think about those family dinners that get a little awkward.
Oh, tell me about it.
He starts choosing his apostles,
Yeah.
right? And his own brothers, James and Jude, not on the list.
Can you imagine? Talk about a tough conversation with the family.
Right. And the book says this actually caused like a real rift. His mother's faith even wavered for a bit because of it.
Huh.
It wasn't until after, everything happened, the resurrection and all that things kind of settled.
Wow. I mean, if Jesus had family drama, maybe the rest of us shouldn't feel so bad when our life choices raise a few eyebrows at Thanksgiving. Makes you feel a little better, right?
Right. But anyway, back to those he did choose. Starting with the OG6, the first ones, we've got Peter, Andrew, James, John, Philip, and Nathaniel. Big names later on, but at this point, they're just starting to figure out what they've signed up for.
They're basically going, okay, so what now?
Exactly. And to shake things up even more, Jesus tells each of them to pick someone else, to make a team of 12. And here's the thing, each new apostle chosen, they weren't just random guys Jesus bumped into.
He was curating quite the crew, wasn't he?
It's true. Like, take Matthew the tax collector. Not exactly the most beloved profession then or now, honestly.
Yeah, not winning any popularity contests with that one. But he had the skills, right?
And the connections.
Yeah.
Then there's Thomas. He was a fisherman, a carpenter, and a mason.
Talk about multi-talented.
Right. A regular first-century Bob the Builder.
And, this wasn't by accident. Jesus saw the value in a diverse team.
So you're saying Jesus was all about that diverse hiring strategy, even back then. Tell me more.
Oh, absolutely. Then we have James, the brother of John, who brings in James Alphaeus, another fisherman, but also a farmer. And then John picks James's twin brother, Judas Alphaeus, also a fisherman.
So experience on the water was a hot commodity.
It seems like it. Now, Peter, he went for Simon, this former merchant, but Simon was really passionate about the Zealot movement, fighting for Jewish independence. And then, to round it all out, Nathaniel brings in Judas Iscariot. And okay, we all know how that turns out, but...
Yeah, things didn't exactly end well there.
No, they didn't. But at this point, Judas Iscariot was trusted with managing their money. He had this whole background in Jericho, knew his way around finances.
It's wild, right? This isn't just a group of fishermen anymore. It's more like Jesus looked around and thought, we need everyone at the table. We need different voices, different experiences if we're going to actually make a difference.
Exactly. And that actually perfectly foreshadows his message. It wasn't about fitting in, but about celebrating what makes us different.
And how those differences can actually make us stronger, right?
Totally. But speaking of bringing people together, we have to talk about the dinner party Matthew throws for Jesus, which, of course, wouldn't be a good story without some drama.
Well, I'm sure the Pharisees had something to say about this, didn't they? Give me the good stuff. What went down?
Well, imagine it. Matthew's hyped to show off his new life, his new path, right? So he throws this big dinner party. The only problem is his old friends weren't exactly who the Pharisees expected Jesus to be hanging out with.
Let me guess. They weren't exactly following all the rules.
Not even close. We're talking tax collectors, sinners, you name it. Anyone in Capernaum, but not exactly welcome in the synagogue. It caused a stir, to say the least.
Pharisees were probably freaking out.
Oh, big time. But here's the real kicker. Jesus didn't try to smooth things over. Not at all. Instead, he just doubles down, saying, look, I'm here for everybody. Everyone is welcome at my table.
Mike Shrub. He really knew how to make a statement.
He absolutely did. And he actually said something like, I have come to proclaim joy to the socially downtrodden and spiritual liberty to the moral captives. I have come not to call the righteous, but sinners.
Powerful, right? He knew his message of love, of acceptance was for everyone, regardless of their past. It makes you think, how often do we let societal expectations dictate who we hang out with, who we offer kindness to? Jesus clearly didn't care about any of that.
And that message is as relevant now as it was back then. But here's the thing. While he was publicly challenging the norms, privately, he was all about connecting with his disciples on a personal level. In fact, the book says he spent a whole day with each of the new apostles, just answering questions, calming worries, getting to know them.
Imagine having that kind of one-on-one time with Jesus. It makes you wonder, what was it like to have that level of access to his teachings?
It definitely wasn't just about information overload. It was about creating a bond, fostering genuine understanding.
Building a foundation.
Right. And even with the best teacher, the most revolutionary ideas, well, they take time to sink in, Like, have you ever had a moment where you hear something life-changing and you're just like, wait, so does that mean I have to change too?
More often than I'd like to admit.
Yeah.
So are you saying the apostles weren't perfect students?
Oh, they definitely weren't. The book talks about how much they struggled to, reconcile his radical ideas with what they already believed, how they tried to make his words fit into their old way of thinking.
It's that human thing, isn't it? To resist change, even when we know it's good for us.
Totally.
Welcome back to our deep dive into the apostles' kind of like origin story, I guess you could say.
They're pre-fame days, right? We always think about them as apostles, but this period, these 5 months, they're still figuring it all out.
Totally. Mm-hmm. And we've seen how Jesus put his team together, how he, trained them, challenged them, and even told them, hey, don't forget to rest. Which, let's be honest, is a lesson we all need sometimes.
Amen to that.
But now it's time to, get real. Even with the best preparation in the world, launching anything new is tough, right?
Absolutely.
So what about these guys? During this testing period, what challenges did they bump into?
Okay, put yourself in their shoes for a second. You're a fisherman just trying to make a living, right? Feed your family. You've got nets to fix, bills to pay, and all of a sudden, you're signing up to follow this radical teacher who's claiming to be the Son of God.
It's a bit of a career change, to say the least.
Yeah, a bit of an understatement. It'd be like quitting your office job to join a band, hoping to make it big.
Except in this scenario, the stakes are a lot higher than just selling out a concert.
Right, and it's not like the world was, just waiting for their message. They faced skepticism, rejection, even hostility. And their own families were struggling to understand it all.
Oh, I bet. It's tough when your family doesn't get it,
The worst. It really makes you think, what kept them going through all of that? Was it blind faith? Sheer willpower? Or was there something deeper there?
It's easy for us to look back at these figures, from a distance and see them as almost superhuman, like they never doubted, never struggled. But here we see them as they were human.
Messy, flawed humans, just like the rest of us.
Exactly. And what's interesting? The Urantia book suggests that what really bound them to Jesus, what helped them through all the tough stuff, wasn't just his message. It was Jesus himself.
It was the connection, the relationship.
Exactly. They felt seen by him, understood.
He believed in them, even when they doubted themselves. Remember Matthew saying how the less he understood Jesus, the more he loved him.
Right. It's like this paradox sometimes. The more we learn, the less we feel like we know.
But sometimes, pushing through that, you come out the other side even stronger.
With a deeper understanding.
Yes. And that's what they had with Jesus, this connection, this shared purpose.
It reminds me that we're not meant to go through this life alone. We need each other.
Preach. But, okay, we've talked about their struggles, but what did their day-to-day look like? Was it all philosophical debates and prayers?
Yeah, give us the behind the scenes.
Okay, so remember how Jesus was all about the practical approach? He tells them every other week, go back to fishing.
Wait, really? So even while spreading the word, they still had to, pay rent.
Apparently. It seems some things never change.
It's the original side hustle.
Right. They'd fish for 2 weeks, sell their catch, and that would support their ministry for the next 2 weeks.
Talk about dedication. Okay, so when they weren't fishing, what were they up to?
Spreading the word, of course. They traveled to different towns, talking to people, sharing meals, offering comfort to those in need. And sometimes, I'm sure, challenging some strongly held beliefs.
It was a grassroots campaign, town by town, person by person.
Exactly. It's actually incredible how organized they were, even back then. They had someone in charge of money, someone in charge of travel logistics, even crowd control.
Jesus knew what he was doing.
Oh, for sure. He understood that if you wanted to make real, lasting change, you needed more than just passion. You needed a plan.
Structure. A solid foundation.
Right. It wasn't enough to just talk about this new way of living, this new way of experiencing God. You had to create a system to support it.
It's a good reminder that anything worthwhile takes more than just good intentions. You got to put in the work. But let's talk about the message itself, the teachings. What were they actually saying that was resonating with people? Were they just repeating what was already being said, or were they preaching something totally different?
Well, that's what's so fascinating. What Jesus was teaching was completely different from what everyone else was preaching.
Oh, I got to hear. So what made it so radical? What was he saying?
Okay, so back then, the Pharisees, right? They were all about the law, the rituals, doing everything exactly by the book. According to them, salvation. That was something you earned through good deeds and perfectly following every single rule.
Sounds a little rigid, to be honest.
Oh, it was. It was a system that left people feeling trapped, burdened, like they could never measure up.
I can imagine.
But Jesus, he offered this completely different way. His way was about love, grace, a personal connection with God.
It was about your heart, not just your actions.
Exactly. He was saying that God's love was, get this, unconditional. It was available to absolutely everyone, no matter what.
Whether you were the richest guy in town or, a tax collector.
It didn't matter. Everyone was worthy of love. Can you imagine how refreshing that must have been?
Especially back then, it must have been a breath of fresh air.
It's what drew people to him. He offered hope to the hopeless, freedom to the captives, a clean slate to those who felt trapped by their past mistakes.
Instead of you messed up, you're out, it was more like, come as you are, let's try again.
Yes. He taught that real change, real repentance wasn't about some big showy display. It was about what was going on inside, in your heart.
It makes you think, how often do we get so caught up in appearances and doing all the right things that we forget about the most important thing, connecting with something bigger than ourselves?
It's so easy to lose sight of that. But even with this beautiful message, I'm guessing not everyone was thrilled about it, right? I mean, change is hard even when it's good.
Totally. Some people probably felt threatened by Jesus' message.
Oh, absolutely. Because his message was about more than just personal change, right? It challenged the whole system. People in power, the Pharisees, the religious leaders, they saw him as a threat.
Because he was challenging their authority, their whole way of life.
Exactly. And it wasn't just external resistance they had to deal with, Even the disciples, the ones closest to Jesus, the ones who'd seen the miracles firsthand, even they struggled.
Oh, I bet. They were human after all.
Right. And the book talks about their doubts, their worries, the uncertainty they felt about it all. They questioned Jesus's methods. They worried about what would happen next. They even struggled to fully grasp what his kingdom actually meant.
Which honestly makes them a lot more relatable, don't you think? Even they had their doubts.
For sure, because doubt is a part of faith, right?
It's a part of being human.
Exactly. And what's amazing is that Jesus didn't shame them for their doubts. He didn't demand blind faith. He met them where they were at.
He listened, he answered their questions, and he trusted that they would find their way. What a lesson in leadership.
Right. Sometimes the best thing we can do is just create space for questions, for doubts, because that's where real growth happens.
And we're back for the grand finale of our deep dive into, Apostle Boot Camp.
Right. We've seen how Jesus built his A-team, trained them, gave them pep talks, even encouraged naps, which, let's be real, we all need sometimes.
Amen to that. But now it's showtime, right?
Just go time.
So how does Jesus take them from those heart-to-hearts to, shouting from the rooftops?
Well, picture this. It's Sunday, January 12th. The apostles gather, probably thinking they're in for another quiet lesson, right?
Yeah, maybe a little more strategizing, a little more one-on-one time.
Exactly. Instead, Jesus throws them a curveball. He officially ordains them.
Wait, so no more practice rounds. It's straight to the big leagues.
No more practice rounds. He's like, all right, guys, you're ready. Go out there and be my ambassadors.
Wow. Talk about a vote of confidence. That's huge.
Right. He was basically handing them the keys to the kingdom, or at least the keys to, spreading the word about the kingdom.
What a moment. So what were his final words of wisdom before sending them off?
Well, ever the pragmatist, he gave them some pretty concrete advice. Knowing this next part wouldn't be easy, he was like, listen, if you need to call out the authorities, let me handle that.
Smart. Don't get bogged down in politics. Focus on the message.
Exactly. He wanted them to avoid unnecessary drama and stay focused on what mattered, love, forgiveness, that whole deal.
Which, honestly, is still good advice today. It's easy to get caught up in the, the back and forth, the arguments. But sometimes the most radical thing you can do is just lead with love.
Totally. Actions speak louder than words, right?
Always. Okay, so they've got their instructions, their marching orders. Are they finally ready to, drop their nets and change the world?
Almost. But first, Jesus, being Jesus, adds one more thing, and it's so telling about who he was.
Okay, lay it on me.
He reminds them to make sure their families are taken care of while they're out there doing their thing.
Always thinking of others. That's incredible. It's one thing to, preach about compassion. It's another thing to actually live it, you know?
He walked the walk, that's for sure. Okay, back to the story. So they do what he says. They head back home for a few weeks, get everything sorted, spend time with their families, do one last haul of fish.
Stock up on snacks for the road.
Exactly. And then they set their sights on Jerusalem and Judea, ready to share what they'd learned, what they'd experienced with anyone who'd listen.
What a journey. We started with a group of ordinary guys, saw them become Jesus' inner circle, watched them struggle and grow, and now they're about to launch a movement that will change the world. It's honestly inspiring.
It really is, because it reminds us that you don't have to be, some kind of superhero to do something amazing. These were regular people with families and doubts and fears, but they said yes anyway.
They said yes to something bigger than themselves.
And that yes changed everything.
It makes you wonder, what are we saying yes to in our own lives? What lights us up? What makes us feel like we're part of something bigger?
It's a good question to ask ourselves.
It really is. Well, on that note, thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the early days of the apostles.
Until next time.
Keep exploring, keep asking questions, and maybe, just maybe, you'll discover something incredible.